Peter Gray from the AU Review. Hello, Adam.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I am so good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's lovely to talk to you. Before I get to the specifics of the film, I'm going to ask about moving into this one because obviously prior to Godzilla vs. Kong, you'd worked primarily in the horror field, and I'm going to say your next is just perfection. And they were sort of moderate budgets, especially in comparison. Like, given that you had that leap from those films to Godzilla vs. Kong, how much easier was it coming into this one, knowing kind of how big everything was?
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning you're next. We're actually doing a 4K sort of new color grade for the film coming out soon. But plug the it's interesting because I got into doing horror movies initially because they were films that I could get financed, and by financed I mean they didn't cost any money to make, and that's what I could scrounge up in order to make a movie. Horror movies are interesting because they have an audience no matter. Like they don't need necessarily like name actors or anything like that to be successful. Sometimes if a horror movie is just effective as a horror film, that's all the production value you need, and you can take off. So as a up and coming filmmaker, it's a great place to start. And again, I mean, that sounds like I'm just kind of, I used horror to get to where I am, but I definitely want to get back into horror at some point. But my main thrust as a filmmaker, my main drive growing up was always in, big tentpole cinema. I was a big Star Wars fan, Indiana Jones, the Alien series, etc. And so this is always where I wanted to get to as a filmmaker. But the lessons in horror were very strong because they forced me to, a lot of the times, be very creative and not rely on visual effects. I mean, here I am making a big visual effects movie, but I think one of the greatest things that I did was kind of resist visual effects for so many years in the horror space, where we wanted to do everything practically. And the reason for that is that we knew we didn't have the budget to pay somebody to do it well enough where it wouldn't look horrible if we did it in CGI, So I kind of resisted getting into the whole CGI game until I knew that we could afford to make it look good.
Yeah. And I was like, at the ending of, I heard you refer to them as like GVK and GXK. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. I tend to, like if it was just me and the editor, we would usually say GXK, I think.
Yeah. But like at the ending of GVK, we obviously saw that Kong saved the day, and it's sort of like fair to say that Godzilla had to accept that. Was there ever that discussion going into this film of like, maybe they can be buddies from the get-go, or like, do you kind of always needed that conflict for the story to sort of have more of an impact?
Yeah, no, I mean, my interpretation always at the end of GVK was that there was sort of an uneasy truce. I mean, Godzilla, walks away from Kong at the end, but I mean, if you look at him, he whips his tail around like when my cat's being sassy to me. It's like he gives him this little like, okay, whatever, we're good for now. I mean, they did help each other out, and he's giving him a pass, but the indication to me was that Godzilla was kind of saying like, hey, you stick to your end of the bargain, and I'll stick to mine. And by that I mean that Godzilla runs the surface, and if Kong can go down in Hollow Earth, he can do whatever he wants. And that's sort of the idea. And so this movie was always developed with that kind of concept in mind, in some ways, I don't think there's anything fun about Godzilla and Kong just getting along. I mean, at the end of the day, they're more like a buddy cop kind of duo, like they don't really like each other, but they have to work together. And that's the pleasure of watching them is that sort of dysfunction.
Well, I mean, I was like, it'd be kind of great to have an actual like buddy cop thing where they're like, sparring the entire time, trying to find someone else, having good cop, bad cop. So like, I'm all for it. If you want to make a comedy or a horror with them, I'm all for it. I'm excited now for your next 4K. That's made my morning. So
Excellent.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. You too.
No worries. Cheers.